All right. Welcome. This is Frederick Keenan with I'll just call it a special edition podcast. We're not going to give it a name or anything like that. It's just two guys who are happen to be fathers having a conversation. So we'll just call it a special edition Father's Day podcast. And so at the time of this recording, Father's Day is obviously over. But Danny and I thought still, regardless of that, it's still a good topic to talk about fatherhood. And so he and I are going to be chatting about some things. We don't have any whole lot of formatting. It's going to just be conversational about the topic of just fatherhood. So welcome, Danny.
Yeah,
Appreciate you doing this with me, man. I'm looking forward to it.
I've been looking forward to this too. This is going to be an awesome conversation, and
Yes, sir.
yeah,
Yes, sir.
it's going to be good.
Yes, sir. All right. So let's start the ball rolling with
Yeah.
one of the questions that I've been thinking about, and it's a question that we can just talk about a little bit, which is our individual experiences as fathers, and what was that like? I know that everybody has a different attitude, if you will, or different feel for what their father's experience was with them. I know for me, my father was not around a lot. He left the family when we were very, very young, and so I can remember. And I don't like to call it trauma because it's not really trauma, but I can just remember the bad part of that of not having my dad. And so I just like to know, just from you, tell me about what your experiences was like with your own individual father.
Yeah. So mine was I don't want to say similar, but my dad was not in the house as far as that goes. It was kind of similar. My mother and my father got divorced when I was gosh, I don't even know, less than 1 years old. I don't even remember,
Mm.
obviously, with him being in the house. And we lived in New Jersey at the time. I was born in New Jersey. And shortly after, we had started to move back and forth. I think we hung out in New Jersey for a couple years. I still barely remember that.
Mm-hmm.
And we moved to Miami. And we had moved back and forth a couple times very early on. But my mom, probably in a year or two, started to kind of date again, and basically was with the my stepfather, who she ultimately married. But my father, yeah, I didn't grow up with him. He had got remarried to the woman he's still
Mm.
married with, my stepmother, who's amazing. She's like a mom to me.
Okay.
And yeah, so I didn't grow up with him in the house at all. In fact, I would say maybe once a year I'd get to fly up to New Jersey and visit him for a few weeks out of the summer, which I always enjoyed. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I did, I find it, especially as a kid, going up there and seeing, basically at that point, all my family was there, grandparents on both sides, and all that stuff,
Yeah.
cousins galore, and it was really good. It was a really
So,
good.
so you had a different kind of dynamic because you had, even though you did not have your biological father or
Mm,
had contact with him being in the house, you still had a stepfather that was still a father, right? So,
yeah.
so talk about, how I guess the better discussion is to talk about the relationship between you and the stepfather as more than just to talk about the biological father. So, what was that relationship like with him?
He was an interesting guy. I mean, I love him with all my heart.
Interesting.
Um,
That's good.
yeah, he was man, he was a workaholic, and
Okay.
so I really didn't see him much, to be honest with you. And
Okay.
so his story kind of definitely kind of points to, or kind of alludes to, gives you reasoning why he was the way he was. So his name was Bill, and he was really cool guy. But he came. His family was, first of all, his family. He's from Cuba. His family was in Cuba, and they had to leave when Castro kind of came into
Mm-hmm.
power, and they
Mm-hmm.
went and they stayed. I don't know the exact period of time, but they stayed off of an island in the Caribbean for some time. They lost everything they had in Cuba. They were fairly wealthy, and so he was, I want to say, 10 or 12 years old. He got put on a plane with his older brother, who was 3 4 years older than him, something like that, and they
Wow.
got sent to New York to stay with I believe it was their aunt. And so he, from a young age, was running the street, did a bunch of stuff he didn't need to do.
Wow.
Um, but I find, like most, the immigrant story of coming and creating a life, busting their butt, doing what they
Yeah.
need to do, right? Incredible work ethic. And that was him. So he had this thing that he wanted to be rich, that he wanted to help his family, bring his family
Mm-hmm.
up, be wealthy, and he worked in the car business. So he was in the largest Toyota dealership in the Southeast. He was the manager, right? So it was basically the owner of the
Yeah.
dealership, the son who was kind of in charge of stuff, and then my stepfather.
Yeah.
And so he had this keep up with the Joneses mentality where he would see the owner with a yacht and he would see the owner here and there. And so he really
And then
wanted
he
that.
wanted it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
wanted it. So, man, I didn't see him very often. And he always treated me like his son, even though I was his stepson. For sure, I didn't feel like things were any different. He definitely babied my sister, which was his daughter, right? But that could have been because she was the youngest and a girl. And,
Yeah.
I don't want to blame him for that. But man, I want to say I saw him half a day a week, maybe.
Wow.
Sundays
Wow.
he worked a half day and Wednesdays was his day off. So I remember he'd pick us up from school here and there, take us to the batting cages, get hot dogs, stuff like that. We'd have a fun night. And shortly, I want to say I was about 14, my mom and him got divorced. So they
Really?
had a very volatile relationship, argument wise. Things were never physical, but there was crazy arguments and screaming and things being thrown. And my mom, both he and my mom had explosive tempers. So in a way, I had this weird way of connecting with him. It was typically, he loved to go to the movies. So once a week, we'd go see whatever movie was out and new. We'd go see it. He loved going to restaurants. So we'd always go to, whatever restaurant he wanted to. He'd take us to, money at most times was not an issue. So he would take us to really nice restaurants. So as a young adult, I had this vast, experience with fine dining in Miami, which is pretty odd, right? So it was cool when I was dating and
So you were
taking
living
girls out.
and I'm not sure if this is the right word, but it's kind of like you were living the mafia life of the high dollar restaurant feeling, kind of, that kind of feel, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, at some points it definitely felt like that, and
Yeah.
so a lot of my time was spent in me and my sister, my sister and I sharing the passenger seat of a sports car, while we drove
Wow.
around, going places, and
Yeah.
which was kind of cool. It was
Yeah.
it was different,
That made me
uncomfortable,
think
but
about something when you were describing it, because I think about the fact that there are a lot of fathers who are present as best they can. A lot of them are more present than others. Like some are present, but they just work all the time and they're not there all the time. And their
yeah,
presence, I guess, is they're working because they feel like if I go out and work and make the money, then that is how I'm giving you my presence. I don't have to be here with you all the time to go to your softball games or to go to your football games or whatever. As long as I'm making the money and you have a roof over your head and you have somewhere to sleep, then I'm being there. And so talk about that, because my next question would have been, what do you think makes a good father? Is it the ones who are present all the time and they give you all of your time? Or is it the ones who give you what they can, but yet they still provide for you? So what do you think, in your opinion, now that you're a father, what
yeah.
makes a good father? What is the definition of that?
That was definitely a question I think that you and I both had in common, right? To
Yeah.
ask each other. So in light of knowing that in his eyes, he was trying to give us what he didn't have,
Yeah.
um, I would say he did a good job. I don't find that as my definition. I will say this before I tell you what I believe in my eyes and why I believe is important is on his deathbed, because he died I think he was just 50. He was very young. He had
Wow.
very aggressive cancer. One of the last things he said to me was, "I'm sorry, I've spent too much time working, and I spent too much time trying to put money together and bring in money. I didn't
Yeah.
spend time." And he said, "Spend as much time with your family as possible." At that time,
Yeah.
my oldest daughter was probably 4, maybe
Hmm.
5, something like that. So that, you talk about a man's last words have a
Yeah.
lot of weight.
Yeah. That's profound.
And it broke me down, and I still think of that. I mean, I want to say I think about that almost daily. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like it is a measuring stick that I use in how I father and how I spend time with my family. Like, okay, yeah, I need to provide, we need to do this,
Yeah.
but like no one, like when I die, I'm not gonna say, "Oh, I wish I worked, I wish I
Yeah.
worked harder."
Yeah. Most
Wish
definitely.
for sure. So for me to finally answer your question, um, I think what makes a good father is is someone who is adaptable to the family dynamic, because every family dynamic is different. Um, that that exists, meaning
Hmm.
this will probably segue into another topic, but I have three daughters,
Hmm. Hmm.
from 10, I'm sorry, from 11 to 22. And our family dynamic is different, and they don't care how much money I make. They don't
No.
necessarily want to play sports. I mean, they play sports here and there, but my oldest daughter never wanted to. Um, and and just being sensitive to that. And for me personally, and I just, this is what's personal to me, spending time. Like they want time. And I can
Yeah.
tell
Yeah.
when I'm spending more time than I'm not. I can tell in their attitude, and just how much peace they have, and so on. And I think that that's really important. I think it's being
Yeah.
adaptable, recognizing that, and and being present, right? And
Hmm.
not just present and on the phone, but present, and they're very affectionate, right? So they like to cuddle, right? But being for them, that present looks that way. And
Most
I would
definitely.
also say, thirdly, allowing myself to be challenged, to
Hmm.
grow.
Hmm.
Like if I'm not growing, and I'm not, I'm like, and maybe that's part of being adaptable. But if I'm not growing, and I'm not allowing myself to be challenged, and I'm not accepting of the challenge to
Yeah.
grow,
Yeah.
they're gonna have a dad who just says, just do what I say, and
Hmm.
this is this and that, you know what I mean, and
Hmm.
who's not getting to really be effective.
Yeah,
So
that's so profound
yeah,
that you said it because part of it, and I don't mean to cut you off there, but
no,
part of it is I think maybe what I'm hearing you say is the feedback is being able to say, okay, I'm not perfect, and so what is it that I could be doing better? How could I be a better dad to you? And I think that's part of that adaptability, flexibility, what do you want to call it? That
yeah,
ability to change and adjust. Because I think both of us can agree that when a child is 2 years old, they need a certain father, but when they're 12 years old, they need a different father. And so
yeah,
you had to be able to say, okay, that's what you need when you were two. This is what you need when you're 12, right? And
yeah,
so that you're right, that ability to adapt and be flexible is powerful. But one other thing too that you mentioned that kind of sparked me was time, man. That is,
mm,
I preach that out, and I think as I get older, I'll be 58 this year. As I get older, I start to realize more and more and more about life is about time. It's not about the money. It's not
yeah,
about the houses. It's not about the cars. None of us, like you said with your father, none of us is going to get to our deathbed and say, man, I wish I had worked more.
mm,
Man, I wish I had got a bigger house. Man, I wish I
yeah,
had got a better car. None of us are going to say that. We're all going to say, I wish I had more time. And
yeah,
so that is the greatest thing that we can give people. And so if we can give that to our kids, that time, that going to the soccer game, that going to the football game, that
mm,
sitting with them when they need to be cuddled and talked to, and that part, that to me is the biggest definition for a father, I think. Would you agree with that?
yeah. I mean, what's more valuable than time? So
Yeah.
if we're giving money, right? Okay, like that's there's a
Yeah.
value to that. Your time, you have a
Yes.
finite amount of moments on this earth, and
Yes. Yes.
investing the time is huge. So let me ask you. So let me being that now is that like your, if I were to ask you that question, is that your main, would that be your main answer? Time,
Oh,
like
for
just
sure,
investing
for
time.
sure, for sure. Now,
Okay.
and now, and I don't know if we'll get into this or not, but we have a different dynamic because I think I have girls who are adults now. One of them almost
Hmm.
40 years old, and so all of my
Yeah.
kids are grown and gone and living their
Yeah.
lives now. So now my focus is more on my grandkids and getting into their
Yeah.
lives. And matter of fact, I just spent some time with one of them before I got on this podcast with you. She went to one of my classes with me where I teach school, and just riding in the car with her for those 30 minutes, getting there and 30 minutes back was just amazing, man. I could see so much of my daughter in her. Excuse me. I could see so much of my daughter in her, and
Hmm.
having that conversation with her about what she wants to be when she grow up and how her grades are. I mean, that time, man, that 30 minutes of just riding in the car with her is priceless. And so, yeah, I would definitely say that now at this stage in my life, that being a father and grandfather is all about time. We
Yeah.
work these jobs, we try to make these bills, we try to pay money, do these things, but man, there's nothing going to replace the time. And that has
Yeah.
got to be, I think, the most important definition for being a father, I think. So,
Yeah. So going back to your father not being present, um, how do you think that affected that time? Is that, you think that's the main catalyst and motivation, or is it just something how did you come about this time? Is that because of him not being
Yeah,
there? Or?
yeah. I like to think that maybe that's part of it because he wasn't there, and because I do
Mm,
think that. But I think more than that aspect of it is just that I'm getting older, right?
yeah,
And as you look at 58 this year, you look at your life and you think, man, I've been on this earth 58 years, man.
mm,
And whether we want to believe it or not, and a lot of folks don't want to talk about it this way, but you have less time left in front of you than you do behind you.
yeah,
And so it just makes this different perspective of, man, where are you going to spend these years, these latter years that the Lord calls them? What are you going to spend them doing? Trying to make more money? Trying to
yeah,
get a bigger house? Trying to get a bigger car? And knowing that time is the biggest asset that you can give anybody that you love. So along with my dad not being there, but also the fact of just getting older and wiser, a
yeah,
lot of young fathers probably don't even think this way, but they will when they're 50, right? When you
yeah,
turn 50, 55, almost 60 years old, your perspective changes a lot about where you're spending your time as versus your money. So that's where I think it
yeah,
comes from the most. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I second that. I have become very aware of the time that I may have left. Just
Yeah.
so I'm 46, and I want to say just a few months ago, someone called me middle aged, and out of like out of response and habit, because it had happened earlier on, when I was like 35. I'm like, yeah, I'm not middle aged. Like, I'm gonna live longer than 70. I was like, I'm not middle aged. And I stopped and I thought about it, and I was like, I might be middle aged. And that if I lived it, to be, 80,
Yeah.
82, or no, I'm sorry, 92. My math is all off. That'd be pretty good. You know what I mean? Like, I'd
Yeah.
be happy
Yeah.
with that. It's a nice long life. And I thought, whoa, I'm middle aged. And it actually, it kind of just sent me down this spiral for a couple days. And I remember I texted one of my good friends, and I was like, dude, I think I'm having a midlife crisis.
Midlife crisis. Yeah.
And his response was great. He's like, what did you buy? And I was like, bro, no, nothing. I didn't buy anything. I think I'm just I'm
Yeah.
having this crisis. It was good because it gave me some perspective.
Yeah.
He's very wise, and he's even younger than me, but he's like super wise. And he kind of
Yeah.
gave me some really good perspective as I was trying to grasp at the significance of what middle age is.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, it's like it's halftime, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Most
like, all right,
definitely.
here's the second half. We got it
Yeah.
ahead of us. What did we learn from the first half?
That's
Let's make
right.
it count,
Yeah.
right?
What are you going to do this other half that you have learned, hopefully learn some things from and can do
Yeah,
better? Finish well. I hear that phrase
yeah.
in my mind, finish well. You had 58 years to live on this earth. Now, what are you
Hmm.
going to do with the other 30 or 40 that you may be blessed to have? So that's
Yeah.
where it comes from, man. It's just this idea of spending that time. And I love,
Mm.
like I said, spending time with my grandkids and being with them. I take
Yeah.
my grandson to football practice just about every day. And we spend time together. And that's really what fatherhood should be about. Leaving that legacy of, hey, I was able to spend time with you and pour something into you so that when I am gone, you'll have something to look back and say, hey, my granddad or my poppy taught me this.
Yeah.
That's really to me what father should be about. And I think that some of the young, and this is a question we'll get to in a little bit, hopefully if we have time, but I think that's what some of the younger fathers miss. They miss
Yeah.
that part of it. They're so focused on trying to get money and grinding and hustling that they leave the kids out. And no kid is going to ever come back and say, hey, Dad, thanks for hustling. Hey, Dad,
Yeah.
thanks for grinding. They're not going to thank you for that. They're going to thank you for your
Right.
time. And so that to me is the biggest part of it. And we probably beat that question up more than we should
Yeah.
have, but
Well,
it's a good question.
I have a question. So this is not one, I don't think it was one of my questions, but you had mentioned being a grandfather. So, and this is why I'll give an explanation why this question kind of came up. So earlier in the year, I went down, my dad and my stepmother now live in Florida.
Hmm.
Oddly enough, right? They never quite made it down when I was down there, but now that I'm in South Carolina, they kind of came for a year and then they went down to Florida. So, I went down to visit them. It was just me. I just felt in my heart, be intentional, and go visit them. And actually, when they were here for a year, we didn't get to see them very much. We were having a rough season. They were trying to find work and trying to find a home and all this stuff. So we
Yeah.
just missed each other a lot, which is kind of sad. But I felt to be very intentional. And I just told my wife, like, I think I'm going to take a long weekend and I'm going to go to Florida and just hang out with them.
Yeah.
They're empty nesters now. Like, they've always had my youngest sister or youngest brother with them, who are now college grads and actually live nearby them so they can see them. So I said, I'm just going to go visit them. And they were kind of like, okay, you're gonna bring the kids, you're gonna bring my grandkids. I'm like, no, I'm just gonna come. You're gonna bring your wife? No, it's just gonna be me. And it was such a time of healing and enlightenment for me,
Hmm.
just being with them. I mean, we just spent the morning together, the evening they had to go grocery shop,
Yeah.
and I went just hung out, and it was really really good. And I realized at that point that me having a an older daughter, an adult daughter who is now out of
Hmm.
the house,
Yeah.
was life changing for me. And my wife and I both were just so upset and just wanting her to be with us. And there's
Yeah.
many reasons, but just in another state was just like, oh, like, well, we're a family, we're together, and I understood them for a moment because they would always push, come up and visit,
Yeah.
can you come up for this long weekend? Always wanting to talk on the phone, and as a parent and being a child to your parent, that's kind of annoying, right? Like, oh, like you don't want to talk to your
Yeah.
parents like all the time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. 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 I get it.
And they're cool, and we never really grew up with them, so it was always good to see them. So it's not like they were super annoying, but I understood at that moment, um, how once you bring grandchildren in to a
Hmm.
relationship, that that parent becomes a grandparent, then there's the parent, and now grandkids.
Yeah.
Um, that child becoming a parent, it's like I almost saw like, wow, now everything becomes about the grandkids.
Hmm.
Like
Most
there's
definitely.
very little time spent with parent that's now grandparent and child that's now parents.
Hmm.
Um, and I think I really enjoyed that trip, and they too, they were like, I can't, but when we should schedule this once a year. Can you come back? And I
Yeah.
realized like, whoa, like if I brought my kids, they are so well behaved and very easy to get
Hmm.
with, but it would be about them.
Yeah.
Just as
Most definitely.
grandparents, like you say, like
Most definitely.
you love hanging out with you love hanging out with your grandkids. So I wanted to ask you that is, um, how is your time with do all of your daughters have kids actually?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. They all do.
Uh,
Yes.
okay, and they're all local, I think, right? I
They're all
remember more or
local
less.
right here.
Okay,
Yes, sir. Yeah,
so
they are.
how is your time with your girls? Do you like long as a parent for just one-on-one time? Do you get to see them a lot? I mean, like, what's that like? And
That's
just I'll
that's a
let you
very
answer.
very good question. I do not. We do not have one-on-one time as much as maybe we should,
Mhm.
because I mean I guess our lives are just different. Our dynamic is just different. So I see my girls when I see the grandkids. But other than that, we do not have a lot of one-on-one time. I would like for us to have more,
Mhm.
and that's another aspect of my fatherhood that I can say I don't want to use the word regret, but that's the word that comes to mind.
Yeah.
I regret that we don't have that kind of relationship where we do have the one-on-one talks where I can go pick them up and take them to lunch and we just sit and talk for an hour, just me and my daughter. We don't really normally do that. So now it's just me and the grandkids. I spend time with them as much as I can, but I don't have that dynamic with my daughter,
Yeah.
with my daughters, I should say. And again, maybe that's a missing piece that's in my own fatherhood. I wish we did have that more, but we just don't have that. Never really have. I mean, when they were kids, we did. We spent a lot of time together, obviously because I was their dad.
Hmm.
But I'll tell you this, and this may be off script too. I'll tell you this: there were a lot of things, and this kind of goes into a little bit of what our discussion should be about too. I will tell you that I made a lot of mistakes as a dad. I made a lot of. I was a little bit too strict. I was a little bit too hard on them, if you will. And I think a lot of that stuff damaged, if you will, some of the things that we could have had when it comes to us having those discussions and those one-on-ones now. And that again alludes to the fact that, sometimes as fathers, we just mess it up. We just make
Yeah.
some mistakes. And so to me, the second opportunity now is my grandkids. I get to get it right. I get
Yeah.
to do it better than what I did before. And I think that's where it comes from with me wanting to spend time with them so much. Because I can recognize now as I get older and as a grandfather that, hey, I probably shouldn't have treated her that way when she was that age. I probably shouldn't have
Yeah.
been so strict. I probably shouldn't have said some of the things I said. But I did them from a place that most fathers come from, which is we just want to protect our girls. We just
Yeah.
want to make sure nothing hurts them, nothing harms them, and sometimes that can be a little overboard when it comes to having daughters. And you know, I don't know if you have stories like that yourself, but sometimes I did a little stuff that was probably a little bit too far, and so
Mm.
now I get a chance to fix some of that, and that's the good part of it. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that answers the question, but that's kind of
Yeah.
what I think
Yeah.
about it. So
No, no, that was
yeah.
great.
All right. So let me ask you
Sweet.
this. We kind of alluded to in that little last conversation there about grandparents and the dynamic between me and my girls and things like that. So let me just go to the next question that I had for you. If I'm not mistaken, Danny, you have all daughters as well. Now you have three daughters as well.
Yeah, three girls.
Yeah. So you have
Yeah.
three girls. I have three girls. So let's talk about the differences between being well, not the differences, but just being a girl dad versus having a boy, because that's a good discussion. A lot of folks say that girls are easier, but then some folks say boys are easier. What has been your experience with being a girl dad? Give me some of the benefits and some of the good versus the bad when it
Yeah.
comes to being a girl dad.
Yeah. Man, I thought about that and I don't know what it's like to raise a boy. So comparatively, I don't know.
That's,
I don't know
yeah,
what's easier, right? But I know
yeah,
I have friends who had boys first and they were like terrified at raising a girl, because their boys, they said their
yeah.
boys were easy. I looked at them and I was like, bro, your kids are wild. Like they're not easy.
It was not easy. Yeah.
No, not at all. But so so check this out. I'm trying to think. Was my second daughter. I was my wife had just given birth to her, and so she's 13 now, Olivia. And I was going down the elevator to go out to the car to get my wife something to eat. She was still in the room, and she might have had her earlier that day or something like that. And so I get on. I get in the elevator and this lady comes on at one of the floors, and I swear she was an angel because I was really really concerned and scared about having a second child. And there's such an age difference between, we're talking 9 year age
Yeah.
difference between our two kids. And my first daughter was very easy at that point. I mean, she was just like having a little buddy around. She was so good and so smart and
Yeah.
very eloquent in speech and just a genius, right? And so I got on and I was kind of worried. I was just like, I don't know this is a major life change and two girls, like, oh no. And this lady gets on and she looks down at my bracelet, right? She said, "Oh, congratulations." I said, "Thank you." I swear she was an angel. The Lord sent her
Mm.
for sure, right? And
Wow.
she goes, "Boy or girl?" And I go, "A girl." And she says, "Your first girl?" I said, "Second girl."
Hmm.
And I go, "I don't know what I'm gonna do." She looks at me and she says, "It takes a man to raise a boy, but it takes a king to raise a princess."
Wow. I like that.
And I remember that vividly. And I would say that having girls um, is it's challenged me in a way that I needed to be challenged.
Yeah. Yeah.
As in, it's made me more gentle.
Hmm.
And I'm so a work in process. Like, like I look at myself sometimes like that was not gentle, like that was not sensitive, you know, that was just a
Yeah.
ball of frustration. And you know what I mean? You're not raising linebackers, you're raising, future women, young women. But I would say primarily it's called the used them to call me up to be more gentle, more sensitive, more compassionate, because I cannot relate. I mean, I can't relate to
Yeah.
any of the issues they have, other than basic human, being a kid in middle
Hmm.
school and insecurity, like that type of stuff. But I just can't relate. And my wife does an amazing job. Like I can't describe what a great job she does with the girls. I'm so grateful for her. And I would say that it's challenged me to yeah to be the man that I want them to look for. I was talking to a young guy that I worked with, and he had his first child. He was young, probably 23, 24, and very smart. So he thought he knew everything, and his child was 9, 10 months old, something like that. And we're talking, and I says, "Yeah, I got my boy, and blah blah blah. You got any kids?" I said, "Yeah, I got 3 girls." He goes, "Oh," he goes, "That's crazy." He's like, "I got it easy. I'm just raising a boy." And I'm like, so I kind of I never processed it, but it just came out of me. And I was like, dude, you think that's easy? I'm like, all I have to do is live out like what it is to be a
Mm-hmm.
good husband and a good
Mm-hmm.
father. And my
Mm-hmm.
girls will hold that as a standard. I'm like, you
Yeah.
need to make sure you raise a young man that doesn't go around damaging people's
That's
daughters.
right. That's
Right.
right.
And I'm like, you
That's
need
a
to be
harder
on your,
assignment.
yeah. I said, you need to be on your
Yeah.
P's and Q's and you need to make sure
Yeah.
that that's not you. And he was just like, oh, he's like, man, I never thought of it like that. He's like, holy
Yeah.
crap.
Yeah.
Like that's some deep stuff.
I think the two aspects of that is that two things that come to mind when it comes to a girl dad. The first one is the part that I kind of mentioned before, which is the part that sometimes we mess up, which is because when you have a girl, you as a dad become really, really scared. Like
Yeah.
really, really like, I don't want to mess this up, and I don't want nobody else to mess this up. I don't want nobody else to hurt her or harm her.
Hmm.
And in some ways, you can almost get to the point where you put her on a pedestal or an idol kind of thing, and now
Yeah.
you're just going too far. And now she's become this thing whereby everything about your life is about making sure she's okay and making sure she's protected, till you
Yeah.
can begin to do too much, and now she's being bugged by it. Like, okay, just back up,
Yeah.
give me some space, leave me alone. I'm okay. You don't have to do like I did. And I hate to tell the story sometimes. You don't have to do like I did and go down to the school and get in little boys' face and terrify little boys because you don't want them to be around your daughter. Or you don't have to do like I did, get on the school bus one day and literally tell all the kids on the school bus to never touch my daughters or never be around my daughters, and make them come to the front of the bus and embarrass them in front of their friends like that. See, you doing those things, and now you're getting too far into it, right?
Yeah.
And so that's one aspect of where you can actually mess it up.
Yeah.
The other aspect of it is that, like you mentioned, you do have to set that standard that says, this is how you should be loved. This is how you should be treated. This is how you should find your worth from a man. And so that assignment is a pretty daunting assignment too. So those two things for me is where and I could take, we went around out of time on this podcast if I told you all the things that I did that were probably just things out of fear and out of
Yeah.
me worrying. And whenever you do that, even the Bible even talks about that, how you can't do things in fear.
No.
You can't do things out of that, because that emotion is just going to mess things up. And so
Yeah.
that aspect, I think, is the toughest part of being a girl dad to me. I don't know how other guys feel about that, but to me, man, it freaked me out having girls, because I remember being a boy.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it is for most dads. The
Yeah.
reason we get so freaked out is because we remember what we were like as boys, and we
Mm.
remember what we did as boys, and we remember that we don't want that to ever happen to our girls. And so we just fight for that, and not in a bad space. And I think our children don't understand that. We do it out of love, but it's just sometimes it comes out wrong. So anyway,
Yeah.
that's the beauty and blessing, and sometimes even the curse of having a girl as a dog. I mean, as a child. So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. So let me
yeah.
ask you, since you kind of brought up fear, I know when I found out, and I want to ask what it was like for you when I found out I was going to be a dad for the first time. Um, I was petrified. Like I was
Yeah.
23. Yeah, 23. I was petrified. How were you? I know you were young, right? Tell me again how old you were when you
17.
17. Okay, so that's
Yeah.
yeah. So that's my wife was 17 and I was 23. And yeah,
Yeah.
okay. So were you how did you take it initially?
Terrified, man.
Yeah.
Terrified. And I was always growing up, my mom is not here to witness this, but I was always growing up somewhat of the good kid, if you will, out of the
Okay.
four that she had.
Yeah.
I never caused any trouble. I was always the one that she didn't have to worry about being in trouble and that kind of thing. So when I came to her and said that I'm 17 years old and my 15-year-old girlfriend is pregnant, I was terrified
Wow.
to tell my mom that. I did, because I knew it would disappoint her. And I think for me, more than anything, it was the fact that I had to say that to my mom, who had held me in such esteem, that I messed up. And that hurt
Yeah.
me more than anything. And so being 17 years old and having to say that to her, not only was it terrifying about the fact that I didn't have no idea what I was doing,
Hmm.
and I knew that meant a whole nother mindset, skill set, tool set that I did not have. It was
Yeah.
just disappointing my mom that hurt the most. But,
Yeah.
you know, we make mistakes, and I did my best to try to be there, made some mistakes even in that, and not being there like I should have been. We have a great relationship now, but at first we did not have a great one. We had times where she did not like me and hated me, and you know, we just had a rough time there for a while, but we resolved all that and got over it. But you know, that was my story with that. So 17 is very young. I mean, matter of fact, I
Yeah.
was 17 when she was born. I turned 18 the very next month, so she was a
Mm.
month old when I turned 18
Okay.
years old. So that's tough for an 18-year-old kid, and
Yeah.
to be a father. That was very, very scary. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, most
Oh
definitely.
wow. Yeah, I remember it was yeah, I was man, terrified um and then I was man, I would say I was really ashamed because I was kind of like the out of my siblings that are from my mom. I don't say the good one, but I was looked at that way, you know.
Hmm.
I didn't give her much trouble. The things I did, she never really found out. At least she didn't let me know that she found out, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was just so ashamed and I was and I knew like because I had a relationship with the Lord at that time. And so I knew that, living this lifestyle was not what the Lord had the best for me for, it was not what he had for me. And and we just kind of went back and forth and then, so when who's my wife now, of course, right, says I'm pregnant, and she was
Yeah.
17. I mean, she was petrified too. And um I had to overcome really like this shame of
Hmm.
of just really it was religion heaped on me, of years of just religion um and so thinking like, man, my mom's gonna be upset, and even telling my dad at that point, who was a pastor in New Jersey, and
Wow.
I mean, a lot of my spiritual growth was because of
Yeah.
him. He's the one he prayed. Yeah, he led me to the Lord when I was 6. Like, just thinking, man, what is this going to look like having this conversation with them? And they were
Yeah.
both conversations with them where they had so much grace for us, and my my dad had never met my at the time my girlfriend, my wife now. My mom loved her. She was just a real out of any of the girls I dated. I mean, probably she liked her the most. She was just very real. My wife has a way of just getting to know you and very quickly and becoming like that old friend, like all of a sudden
Yeah.
just feel like
Yeah.
you knew her for 20 years. So, and man, both conversations went really, really well. And I'm just grateful for that. And it helped. I would say that it really, really helps that immediate kind of shock. Obviously, it was still a lot to process.
Hmm.
And I remember good friends of hers who we had started to hang out with. This is a friend of hers parents, right? And they hang out with her all the time because she'd be at the house, and they said, are you ready? And I remember just saying like, it really doesn't matter because it's like, it's
It's go-
coming, like,
That's
it's
right.
it's coming. So that aspect of it was still there, right? But that initial fear and was thankfully, I mean, the Lord knew he really leaned into the situation and kind of helped squelch or squash that
Sure.
fear by
Sure.
through that acceptance
Yeah.
from both my parents. But
I,
yeah.
I want to ask you something about that because you
Mm.
mentioned that you were 23 and she was 17. So how was that dynamic? Because that's a kind of a significant age gap there of 23 and 17. Because 17 years
Yeah.
old, she's still very, very young. So
Yeah.
how did that play out when it came to your parents and her parents?
Um, Everybody was like, it was not an issue. When I look at it now, I'm like, that was weird, but I mean, it was the Lord. I mean, so we were together and she was 16 and I was like 22, which
Hmm.
is ridiculous to say. Um, every time I say it, I'm like, gosh,
Yeah, I mean, 16 years old is
like,
pretty young, man. I
yeah,
mean,
and I'm an adult, you know what I'm saying?
yeah.
And it was really people are always shocked, but I'm like, well, but we've been married 22 years. And they're like, oh, okay, like my friend group consisted of her older sister, and we worked together, we hung out together, so she was always around for
Yeah.
some time.
Hmm.
And so we were kind of like family, like her family saw me as family. I was always at the house. They always had parties, and so they knew me, and they knew who I was, and so that was like a huge buffer,
Yeah.
So when they found out we were together, it wasn't. I mean, it was kind of a big deal, but it was like, it's Danny, and
Yeah, because you had been around. You were like part of the family. It wasn't like you were
yeah,
some stranger that just kind of came in and
right,
scooped down on the 16-year-old kid, right? So you were
yeah,
you were
yeah,
part of the family. Everybody knew you, and it
right,
wasn't that the dynamic
yeah,
wasn't as bad. So I
yeah. I
just thought
wasn't
I would
the
ask that because that was when you said that, though, man, she was very young, at
yeah,
17 years old and you being 23. So
yeah. I think
uh,
the bigger issue was when she got pregnant. You know,
Yeah.
obviously that was, when you think of it that way, it makes sense. But that was the biggest issue. Um,
Yeah.
but you bring a kid in, and babies warm
And they
people's
change
hearts
everything.
and
It changes
changes
everything.
everything.
Yes, sir. It
Changes
does.
everything for sure.
All right. So I know we've been talking for a while, but I want to just ask maybe a couple of more questions and then we
Yeah.
can kind of wrap it up. But the next question I have is something that I kind of thought about. What is you think maybe one of the scariest things that you have been a part of or witnessed or anything involving your daughters? Like, what is one of the scariest things that you did, they did, that just made you think, oh my God, what am I going to do? What is one of the most scariest scenarios that you can think of when it comes to raising your daughters? I got one that I want to
Yeah.
share, but I just want you to tell me, what do you think is your scariest
Yeah.
moment, I guess.
I mean, there's really only one um that I have, and I'll share like in full vulnerability here. Is One of my daughters struggles quite a bit with mental health, and so she was suicidal for a while,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that was heartbreaking. Like, my world almost came to a it did came to a screeching halt, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, I just think, like, thank God I have Jesus
Mm-hmm.
in my
Yeah.
life, because I don't know what I would do. I mean, I would be in those scenarios. You have to have hope,
Yeah.
and knowing that hope isn't like an ideology or a mantra, but hope
Yeah.
is a person that is alive and
Yeah. Yeah.
exists.
Most
And
definitely.
and I have a very real relationship with the Lord, where I know He has come in and reached His hand into my life in the past, knowing and trusting that He would do the same. And He did. But that was hard. That was really, really hard.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I don't need to go into detail,
Yeah.
but that's it. That's the one thing I would say at this point, thankfully,
Yeah.
that was just terrifying, But
So
what
so
about
not only
you?
not only was that scary, but that was also a heartbreaking moment. And so maybe I could have phrased the question that way, or maybe a
Yeah.
heartbreaking, scary moment, because that along with being scary, but also very heartbreaking to know that your child is having to go through that.
Yeah.
And I imagine you felt helpless and not what to do and how do I fix it, and
Mhm.
like all of us probably do when it comes to our kids.
Yeah.
I have so many. I have a
And I'll
couple that
tell
I
you,
could.
I just want to add to that real
Yeah, go
quick.
ahead. Go ahead.
One of the like, God was so good, because within it, um, you start to almost, you want to blame yourself too. Like,
Yeah.
what did I do or not
Yeah.
do that has led to this? And to those maybe listening that are in this scenario, I would just say that, man, that is spinning your wheels. Like, that's trying to run on water. Like, don't even try. Just be there. Be understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Invite the Lord into it 100%. That was the moment where for the very first moment, I had to realize, like, my kids don't belong to me. My
Yeah.
kids belong to the Lord. And so, having to give my daughter over to the Lord and say, listen, there's nothing I can do other than follow what you show us. And He did.
Sure.
He showed
Sure.
us steps, and He led us in a very wise, aggressive path to nip it in the bud. And
Yeah.
that was a process. But other than that, I can do nothing. So, giving your child over, that came married with giving your child, my daughter, over to the Lord. So when we realize, like, our kids are not ours,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
doesn't excuse me, it doesn't absolve of us, I guess say
Of
it. It
our
doesn't absolve
responsibilities.
us from our responsibilities. Correct.
Yeah.
Thank you for helping
Yeah.
me out.
Yeah.
Um, but, like, they belong to the Lord, so we need to treat
Yeah.
them as if they belong to the Lord.
Yeah.
And that means letting go. That means bringing them in. It looks
Yeah.
different.
I'm so glad you
Sorry, I didn't
said
mean to
that.
cut you off. I just
No,
wanted
no,
to
no, no,
add
no,
to
no,
that.
no.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you said that, because that is it's so important for fathers and even mothers who may be listening to this, particularly fathers who understand that when you're raising children, right, and when you have these little
Hmm.
small babies and you watch them grow up and they're daddy's little girls and all of this kind of stuff, you have to always keep in mind that at some point these young people that you're raising are going to be adults.
Yeah.
And they don't belong to you. And I think parents need to really understand that, yes, we get the privilege and the honor of raising them, watching them grow and watching them develop. but we can't control them in a sense that we can make them what they're supposed to be. All
Yeah.
that's up to the Lord. And so we have to be willing to trust and say, okay, I've been given this charge to raise this person, to make them a better human being. But at the end of the day, it's all going to fall into them being what God has called them to be. And that
Yeah.
may not, and this is where parents and I think fathers miss it, that may not be what you thought it should be. It may be something totally
Yeah.
different. And it may be very scary to realize that, hey, that's what I was picturing here, but it's what the Lord was picturing because they don't belong to you. And so
Yeah.
knowing that it can be scary too, just letting go. And I had to deal with it a lot,
Yeah.
just letting go, which is why I say a lot of mistakes I made with being too strict, and to the point I said, you know what, I just got to let this go. It's just getting to be too much. So
Yeah.
I'll share mine there. Well, hopefully we can wrap this up with the last question, but
Hmm.
there's so many I can share with, the one daughter that I had when I was 17, my youngest daughter. But the one that sticks out the most, since we're talking about this, is one of my scariest was I went to pick her up from work one night. And she was working at a dry cleaner here locally. And I went to pick her up from work, and I had been being strict that week or strict that month and just pouring on the rules and regulations. You can't do this, you can't do that, and da 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 da. And so I went to pick her up, and she was supposed to come out the front door to get into the car to go home, like we had done several times before.
Mm.
And she didn't come out. And all of a sudden, the lights went out inside the store. And I thought, okay, that's weird. The lights are out. They closed the
Mm.
store up, and she still hasn't come out. So I picked up the phone and I called, thinking she was inside the store. I said, where are you at? And she said, the scariest thing that I have ever heard, I'm running away.
Oh man.
And I thought, okay, what do you mean you're running away? And so I immediately got back in my car, pulled around to the back to try to figure out where she might have went out at the back door or something. And she wasn't there. She was gone. And the
Oh
manager
wow.
was there. And I pulled the manager over and said, hey, where's my daughter? She said, I ain't got nothing to do with it. I don't know nothing. I don't want to be involved. And so for a while, maybe a month or so, for a while, my wife and I did not know where she was at. Um,
Wow.
and we couldn't find her.
Jeez.
So that was really, really scary. But again, that was because she felt like we were just being too much. We were just putting too much on her, and we were being too overboard with our strictness and our rules, and that was just her way out. Maybe a week or so before that, which is another heartbreaking moment for me that I still remember, we were in the car, and I was fussing at her about something, and she yelled out loud, I just wish you would leave me alone,
Wow.
were her exact words. And that
Wow.
just broke my heart, because that obviously told me that I was
Yeah.
being too much. And now I can say that, now that they're grown, and I'm having this conversation with you. And I'm not saying it, neither one of us are saying this to make it negative about being fathers. We're trying to make this a very positive podcast. But
Yeah.
hopefully some father out there who's listening can think, okay, let me make sure I don't make those mistakes, right? Let me make sure I don't do that if I'm a girl dad. Let me
Yeah.
make sure I listen to my daughter and try to understand where she's coming from and her perspective, and back up a little bit and let her have some space so that I don't ever have to get to the point where she just gets so frustrated with me that she says, I just want you to just leave me alone, because you don't want
Yeah.
to hear that as a dad.
No.
So maybe that can help somebody when we talk about this. So,
That's good. I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to ask you earlier on when you were talking about how strict you were early on in
yeah.
their life, if that caused them to rebel in any type of way, and it did, obviously, at least in one of
Yeah,
your
yeah.
daughters,
In
right?
that instance, yeah, it did
Yeah,
cause them to do that. And again, you don't want your child to do that. I mean, the scripture in Ephesians that always comes up about parenting. Fathers, provoke not your children, right? I was obviously not honoring that scripture very well, and
yeah,
I can say that now again. But I can't fix that. That's just part of being a father. We all make mistakes. We all live in these human bodies, and
yeah,
that's just part of it. So, all right, last question, and I know we'll wrap this up.
yeah,
As we close this, do you have anything you would say to the younger fathers who may be listening to this? Any advice? Any thing that you would like to share with them? I mean, we've given them a lot of things about not
yeah.
making the same mistakes we've made, but any final advice that you would give to any newbie fathers out there?
Yeah, for sure. Just to kind of reiterate, it's probably this question is good because it's probably a good sign off question, right? It's like
Yeah.
kind of we can culminate some of the things we've talked about in other answers we came about through the questions and put them together. And as a culmination, I would say like, man, and we said this, be present, man,
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
present, and and know that these kids are a gift from God. Like they
Yeah.
are a gift from God. They may have come to you in a time of your life where, according to your standards, was not ideal timing. Um, but they are, that was in their control. Like they didn't
Yeah.
choose. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like
Yeah. Most definitely.
they did not choose to come into your life. They did not choose you as a father. And that's
Yeah.
not a negative thing. Um, but they deserve a really good father. And
Yeah. Yeah.
and and potentially they have one. So I would just say
Mm-hmm.
be present and just recognize that kids don't need a lot. Like they
They
want
don't.
they want acceptance. They
Mm-hmm.
want to know that someone's there to have their back.
Mm-hmm.
And that means someone to listen to,
Yeah.
someone, you know what I mean? Not necessarily someone to always fix their problems, but someone to relate to them.
Yeah.
And ultimately, like what makes us good at something, I love the expression like they'll say, that's better caught than taught, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like that with parenting.
Yeah.
Because you become your parents, like
That's so true. That's
that
so true.
that is like one of the truest statements on earth. Like you become your parents,
Yeah.
to a degree, right? And I would just reiterate that, you know, they're ours, but they belong to the Lord. They are a gift from
Yeah.
God, and they
Yeah.
have a purpose and a calling. And I look at it like a lease. Like you get a lease
Mm-hmm.
from a car. Like if you were to lease a Benz,
That's
when
right.
you lease a car, it's a little different than when you own a car because
Yeah.
you don't want to hit a curb, you don't want to damage that rim, you don't want to
That's right.
scratch the paint because
That's right.
when that car comes back, they're taxing you on
That's right.
everything. You know what I'm
That's
saying?
right.
The
Most definitely.
mileage, all that stuff, right? So not to strike fear in people's hearts, but to be mindful, fathers, that you know they belong to the Lord. So
Yeah.
treat him how he would treat him, and constantly go before the Lord and
Yeah.
allow him to redefine his relationship with you, because ultimately you can only be the father your kid deserves as much as you have the revelation of God as father to you and you're
Most
standing with
definitely.
him. I
Most
mean,
definitely.
that's maybe a lot, but I mean
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
all I got,
No.
man.
No, I totally concur with everything you said. I will add this as we close. I would add that yes, I think just showing up and being present is the best thing you can do. And I'll add this: showing up and being present, even in your mistakes, showing
Mm,
up and being present, even when you don't know what you're doing, showing
yeah,
up and being present when you fumble and when you drop the ball and
yeah,
you make mistakes but you still got to show up. I can
yeah.
think of so many stories, even in my own personal life, where even my grandchildren who don't have fathers who are showing up. I have two grandchildren who have dads who just walked away and said, "Hey, I'm done. I don't even want to be a part of this."
Yeah.
And I would say to them, this is a human being. This is not some uh, piece of material that you can just throw out the window and just get rid of. This is a human being that at some point
Yeah.
is going to grow up and be an adult, and they're going to look back, and so are you when you get older. Look back and say, "Man, what was I thinking? Why didn't I want to be around this person? Why didn't I want?" Because especially if they turn out to be great people,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to have no part of that. And
Yep.
so my advice is
Pause
show
right
up
there.
now.
Pause,
Yeah.
pause right there. Hold on. You don't lose your train of thought. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry, I
So
didn't want
so
to
so my,
cut me off.
that's okay. So my advice is just simply what you said. Show up. Just
Yeah.
and you said it too. They don't require a lot. They don't need you to be there 24 hours a day if you can't. But a phone call, right? A stopping by and taking them to the park, a stopping by and having a conversation. Again, the two guys I'm thinking about that are in my grandchildren's lives, they don't even show up at all. They just
Mm,
basically just walked away as
yeah.
if these two little human beings don't even exist. And I would say to fathers out there who are doing that, stop. Even
Yeah.
if you can't get along with the mom or you can't get along with whatever, don't let that be an excuse, man. You've got to step up. These are human beings that you have been given charge and responsibility for as a dad, and you got to step up. So get help, get advice, do
Yeah.
whatever you need to do, but you got to show up and be present. And that's the advice I would give. So,
It's good.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's really good,
All right.
man.
I think we did a great job on this, man. I think this was good.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that it will help some folks as they listen to it. So yeah, I think this will be good. Now, the next thing I'll say, Danny, we'll close out with is we need to now come back and talk about being husbands. Now we've talked about being
Oof.
dads.
Yeah. I
So the
think that's
next time
yeah.
it might be, how do we be better husbands? How do we fix
Yeah.
those things too? And that may take a while. That's a
I like
intense
that.
conversation. So maybe we'll do that next